Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Tarzan in 1999. Here is the Blu-ray, and it's the 37th Disney animated feature film, and it's the final one in the Disney Renaissance period. Now, this film is not massively loved overall, but it is fairly popular. It done really well at box office and everything. And yes, basically, one of the films that actually I watched the most as a kid in terms of Disney, and I've seen it many times. As I've said in my last couple of reviews, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, that was the last time I saw it. Directed by Chris Buck and Kevin Lima, and Phil Collins, the legendary Phil Collins, does most of the music. And yes, basically, it's the one that I really wanted to give a proper rewatch. Now and see what I exactly think about the film. Precisely review it, and then kind of so I can properly put it on my lists, of Disney and favourite films if it's on there. And yeah, it was one of my favourite films as a kid. And this film, a lot of people do kind of say it's one of the worst actually of the Renaissance. The Little Mermaid and stuff are all better, and for me, this is one of the most underrated Disney films. One of the most underrated films of all time, and an absolute flawless masterpiece of animation. There we go. I absolutely adore this film, and wow, it's just as good as I remembered. And I just don't see how this can be called a bad film. It just is an absolute masterpiece. One of the very best of the Renaissance, and one of my favourite animated films. And you know what? It's not quite my top 100 films of all time, but it is in my top 150 films of all time. Now that, is something else. Joining films like The Tree of Life, There Will Be Blood, and even in that bracket, Citizen Kane. All these sort of films. Some of them are reviewed, some of them not. But yes, it is for me a flawless animated film. And I absolutely adored it from start to finish. This is a film, that just straight away, the Renaissance films, a lot of them just don't have very good openings, let alone, opening acts. They don't really, for me, draw you into these stories too much. They don't really get, invested fully in the characters, the emotion, they don't set the full tone of the film up, and they're just not that compelling in all the openings. This opening is just perfect, straight away, drawn in. Wonderful music by Phil Collins, of course. Two Worlds, which is just an amazing song, and just really gives the scene at the opening an even better kind of feel. It is just such a wonderful opening, just epic, and just so human, and you set up the kind of Tarzan's parents, and kind of they're shipwrecked, and they basically set up this kind of this place to live, and this kind of like a tree house, you could say. They set up, and you see that kind of in the opening montage, you could say, without any dialogue. It's also parallel at the same time with, of course, the gorillas kind of storyline, and it's kind of the parallel, and it works perfectly to set up this film. And basically, very early on, once that scene ends, Tarzan is already the story set up, and Tarzan is with the apes, and the character of Carla, basically becomes his mother, and she takes him in. Her kid is killed. The small gorilla is killed by this, this leopard very early on, and basically, she takes in Tarzan and becomes her own. But her basically Kerjak, who is basically her husband in the film, doesn't quite accept Tarzan at first. He doesn't see him as his son, you could say, and he just doesn't quite buy into the replacing his actual son. And straight away it sets up all the different themes, acceptance, and it just is a wonderful opening. That's the opening. The rest of the film, it's just completely perfect for me, really, and it's just constantly epic, mind blowing, thoroughly human, full of emotion, and just so much fun, full of joy and energy. Tarzan is one of the best protagonists I've seen in an animated film. Of course, voiced by Tony Goldwyn, and just an amazing voice actor in this film as well. You've got Glenn Close, you've got Lance Henriksen as Kerjak, you've got Of course, Brian Blessed, as Clayton, who is kind of this one of the guys that comes in with Jane, and her father, to basically, see the gorillas, and they're kind of there wanting to, research the gorillas and stuff, and but Clayton, is kind of this aggressive guy who's, doesn't take much nonsense and kind of basically tries to hurry the whole thing up. So yeah, basically, they come into it about, just before the halfway mark, and yeah, you've got this wonderful story that's just truly something else, and of course, there's been quite a lot of Tarzan films, and I don't imagine any of them being better than this. This really is just something else. It just, it's got the three acts mainly. You see Tarzan as a baby, then you see him, as a small kid, and then of course he grows up to adult, and it's just a wonderful, it's got this scope, and every single moment, really of all these, segments are just perfect. They work in perfect harmony. They've all got their memorable moments, and it's just this whole arc of Tarzan is just one of the most compelling I've seen in an animated film, and it just builds and builds the narrative. So full of emotion, really for me, and it's very very moving stuff. In the end, and as well as just straight away the kind of the emotional resonance that this film has is just striking. It just it's something that I thoroughly related to as well. Everyone can relate to this film, and the animation in this film is one of the best I've seen. Full stop. Actually, it's wonderful. And really, the only animation I think is better of the Renaissance period is The Lion King. And I've not seen Beauty and the Beast actually, but I I still think from what I see, Tarzan is probably better than that in terms of the animation. It's just wonderful, and as well the action scenes and all this kind of stuff. The way it's designed, it's just so creative, and it's just it's wonderful to look at. The visuals are stunning. It's got wonderful locations and kind of it really is just taken advantage of there. Just wonderful animation from start to finish. This is an action, adventure, and it's kind of a drama and romance as well. And there's so many different themes in this film, but just handled with so much balance and care, and just patience. It's one of them films, as well. It deals with communication, and it's kind of, just like something like Dancing with Wolves. It has the patience for that, and just the patience that is required to kind of pull this off, and the delayed gratification of it all, with the communication, and then it's just so meaningful. It's just wonderful exploration of life. How it deals with communication, acceptance, and family. Very very immensely warm film, full of heart, and all these themes dealt with such balance, and is really just perfect for me. The voice acting is flawless, really. Minnie Driver as well is great as Jane. Really, really memorable here. Brian Blessed is great as Clayton, and this film just it has such a scope. It's just an adventure feel to the film, but it is it's just these moments of humanity throughout the entire film. All the friends that he has, including Turk, voiced by Rosie O'Donnell. It's just they're all great voice acting, in the film. It's a lot of the Renaissance films for me are quite disappointing in terms of the voice acting. Just they all kind of sound a lot of the time generic. Not all of the films, especially not The Lion King. But this one, it kind of does at times. Basically outshine all the other ones I've seen from the Renaissance, and it's just for me no comparison. It just wonderful characters in the film as well. Just fully fleshed out. And just there's so much great comedy in the film. Just works every time. And just adds even more humanity to the film, believability. The comedy just works throughout, and just such a joyous film. One that really as well resonates so much. Kind of. There's so much emotion behind every frame of this film. It's just wonderful, and all the things, all the elements of the filmmaking here are perfect for me. It's a story that it's got so much potential, and this is how you put it off. You know, it's just got everything you really want for me from an animated film. You know, there are better ones, of course, but really this is still kind of a gold standard for me. You know, of animated films, because I don't think. You know, some of the very you know, the golden age films for me, actually, spoilers, really are hard to ever top. And actually, you know, to really compare animated films to them is at times unfair. You know, but really in terms of other films, you know, that aren't you know, right up there with them, Tarzan's one of the very best for me, Disney and animated films. You know, this is it's right up there with some of the best Ghibli films for my enjoyment, especially. One of the Ghibli films, or you know, one or two of them, you know, still leagues ahead of this. But you know, basically, this is just one of my favourite animated films. The music by Phil Collins is just wonderful. Fully emotion, you know, just the emotion behind the songs, the kind of the way it connects to the whole, you know, story and the arc of Tarzan, and just how good these songs are. You know, Two Worlds, of course, being my favourite, and you know, Son of Man, an epic montage where Tarzan becomes a man. You know, you see him from a boy to a man, all within about 3 minutes of this epic montage. You know, and just this film, you know, as well, it perfectly captures you know, childhood as well, the innocence of it all, but as well, you know, the kind of there is a harshness to a lot of the film. This film is dark at times. You know, it really is not afraid to kind of go different places, and you know, it's definitely got its sad moments, but these childhood sequences in particular, you know, they're so joyous, full of energy, and just the character of this film is so alive, really throughout the entire film. You know, the characters, you know, his friends, Turk especially, just so good, so memorable. A lot of the side characters of the Renaissance are just quite forgettable for me, and that's my honest opinion. You know, it's just, especially something like The Little Mermaid. A lot of the side characters are very forgettable for me, and quite generic. This one, you know, these are characters that you know, I've always remembered since I was a kid, and you know, they're so good, these characters. The writing, you know, the voice acting to match, and the way they kind of play a hand in developing Tarzan as well. It's just wonderful, this film. And then, of course, once Tarzan is a man in the film, you know, an adult, you have this romance, and it's one of my favourite animated romances ever. You know, between him and Jane, you know, and it kind of Minnie Driver, of course, as I've said, voices the character, you know, of Jane perfectly. Really, it's just as well great comedy from her, but really as well the way they just kind of tie in this romance with the communication theme, you know, it's just amazing. Just like say Dance with Wolves. Of course, I'm not comparing it. Dance with Wolves is in my top 4 films of all time, but you know, it's kind of like that, where you know, the romance plays a hand in that, and you know, it's kind of the joys and the frustrations of communication, you know, and as well at the same time developing that acceptance theme, which is just wonderfully portrayed, explored in this film. You know, it's just something else. You know, I think it's just an animation film full of heart, full of joy, and it's an epic film. You know, this is just really gives me the shivers. You know, so many different moments throughout the film, and a narrative that is just so stunning. This film is just stunning from start to finish. That's all I can, you know, really say. It's one of my favourite animated films of all time, and you know, it just massively underrated for me. And you know, personally, I think it's the second or third best of the Renaissance. You know, really for me, from what I can remember, the second best. I haven't seen Beauty and the Beast, of course, but you know, I will be seeing that soon. And you know, I'm not, you know, ruling that out, but you know, for me, really, I think this is probably is the second best of the Renaissance period, and yeah, just a truly wonderful film from start to finish. You know, it's just moving. You know, thoroughly human. You know, it has so many different themes that it explores just masterfully. You know, and the action throughout the film, all the different the sequences. You know, the set pieces are thrilling. You know, they feel so alive. You know, and it's got its moments of joy, but it really is at times very moving, and it's just full of wonder. You know, it just has this feel to the film. You know, the times can't be described. A sense of wonder. You know, it just really is something else. You know, and I loved every moment of this film, and you know, I think it's an absolute masterpiece. So overall, this film for me is a masterpiece, as I've said. The 37th Disney animated film, you know, and the one that ended the Renaissance period. You know, which for me is quite baffling. You know, I think this is an absolutely stunning film, a masterpiece, and it's so mind blowing. Really, for me, something that I connected to so much. The emotions are so powerful, you know, in this film. You know, and just all of the characters so memorable and fully developed, really. And the comedy always works. But as well, you know, it's very, very powerful stuff, and just the way it portrays, you know, explores acceptance, theme of that, you know, isolation, you could say at times, you know, loneliness, it kind of plays in hand with that, and communication, and just kind of man versus nature as well at times. It's just striking. It's just you know, wonderful. This film, the animation is absolutely stunning. In this film, the soundtrack, you know, Phil Collins, one absolute legend. Just all of the songs. You know, You'll Be in My Heart as well. You know, which was very well received. Just the whole soundtrack, but particularly as well, Son of Man and Two Worlds. You know, it's just amazing, and the actual score as well is wonderful. Just full of emotion and wonder, and kind of this, yeah, just full of emotion. It's absolutely stunning. This film for me is of course for me a full marks film. It is on my favourite films list, extremely high, as I say, you know, top 150 actually. You know, so it joins about, you know, 15 different films in my top 150. 10 of them being in my top 100. You know, this film isn't quite in the top 100. You know, and there's probably not quite in my top 10 animated films of all time. You know, as I say, there's about 10 films in my top 100 animated. But it is close to that. And for me, it gets, you know, into my 100% plus tiers. Now, a film that is so monumental for me, so mind blowing, you know, full of heart, passion. I just loved every moment of this film. So I'd have to give it 100% plus tier 2. Wow. And that's, you know, really that joins, I'm guessing, The Third Man as the only other film, you know, this month that I've reviewed that's kind of got this rating, I believe. I'm not too sure on that actually, but I'm pretty sure it is that. So the second best, probably, well, my second favourite at least, film of the entire month, which is something else really. And yeah, you know, just an absolutely wonderful film from start to finish. I think brimming with you know, energy. The colours are so wonderful. You know, the whole animation is flawless for me. And you know, all these characters. You know, this story that is really, really just a great story. It is wonderfully explored here. No flaws whatsoever. And of course, the voice acting in the film, again, flawless. And yeah, just highly recommend this film. You know, it's not massively loved, as I said, but it really, for me, you know, it's just one of the best animated films of all time. You know, I'd say probably top 15 actually. And just in every sense, truly wonderful, epic, and human. You know, really is powerful stuff. And I just absolutely adored this whole arc of Tarzan. You know, the kind of the way it perfectly, it has every different, you know, the important kind of stages of life all rolled into one film. And you know, you've got all these characters as well, you know, side characters, and the way that kind of I felt these relationships, Tarzan and Jane, but as well Tarzan and Carla, you know, and even Tarzan and Kerjak, wonderful, human, you know, complex at times, that character of Kerjak, you know, but it just kind of is perfect. This film for me, it's a flawless masterpiece of animation, and yeah, a one that really inspires me in terms of animation. You know, it's just really the gold standard of a lot of you know, modern animation for me. You know, and as I've said, you know, a lot of the films don't quite match. You know, some of these really, really classic ones, the Golden Age. Kind of a spoiler there for some of my reviews, but yeah. Apart from that, and a couple of other ones here and there, you know, and some Studio Ghibli films. You know, this really outshines most animated films I've ever seen. You know, it's just truly wonderful, and yeah, adore the film from start to finish. Monumental masterpiece. So thanks for watching my review of Tarzan, and you know, highly recommend this Blu-ray. Wonderful visuals and wonderful audio. You know, Phil Collins, amazing. So yeah, thanks for watching, and be more animated, films up very very soon as well, and maybe another Fincher film to come as well. So thanks for watching my review.